Hit me.
Hit you?
Well, not.
The first question is, when is it okay to hit back?
Here we go.
We're doing it.
We are doing it. Welcome to the Uncomplicated podcast.
I was just thinking, what time did I text you yesterday about doing this today?
It's probably been less than 24 hours.
It was like 5 o'clock last night.
Yeah.
Shout out to Litos, our creative director.
Shout out to Litos.
Borrowing all his equipment today.
Making it happen.
I texted him. I was like, we've been talking about this since January. I think
it's time.
If we don't do it, we don't do it. So what's this podcast for? Why would we even do another podcast? Because, we already do one every week anyway. So what? Why would we do this?
Why would we do this? There is I'll call it a gift. You could interchange that word with maybe a grace on, I believe, your life, a gift to help keep faith uncomplicated. And I think that's part of just our life's mission, is to help people understand who God is. And so
behind me is a sign, and it says, keep it uncomplicated.
Yes.
And I think that God never intended faith to be complicated, but we sure have a way of doing that.
We totally
have a way of making
doing that.
Things complicated. I think people are complicated.
Totally.
And so, we bring our own issues, our own junk, our own history, our own hurt.
Minutia.
Yeah, we bring that into life, into relationships, and our interpretation of the Bible and all that. And next thing you know, things feel complicated. And I just wonder how many times God's like, dude, you're making this way too complicated.
Yeah.
That's the way the Lord speaks to me, by the way. He says, dude. He says,
Yep.
dude.
Well, that gets your attention.
This is not supposed to be that complicated. So,
right.
So, we have a number of questions that people submitted online, and we should probably get to them. But I just want to say that this is an experiment.
Yeah.
Like I'm
exciting experiment.
Yeah, I mean, I have a little bit of history doing some stuff. But
with your voice. Tell us about that. I think once you maybe did a Hot Wheels commercial.
Oh, that kind of history.
So let's hear it. Let's hear the commercial. How old were you?
Oh, okay. I thought you meant a little history with podcasting, but yeah.
Well, there's that too, but let's start at the beginning.
When I was a kid, I did a lot of voiceovers for like Nickelodeon and Disney and like, that kind of stuff. I did do Hot Wheels.
So let's hear it.
Hear what?
The commercial.
the Hot Wheels commercial?
Yes, it's so good.
I did the voice. Hot Wheels leading the way.
Still sounds. How old were you when you did that?
Go. I don't know, like 12.
12.
But
all right.
Hot Wheels.
Didn't you also do a Disney Channel commercial?
Let's talk about the Lord.
Okay.
Let's talk about the Lord. Let's talk about the fact that I'm wearing shorts right now. All right. Let's talk about that.
Why are you wearing shorts?
Because I came from the gym this morning and we did this last minute and I forgot to bring pants.
Oh, I thought you liked wearing shorts.
And it's probably...
And we live in Southern California,
That's true.
The weather is beautiful today. It's most of the time very beautiful. So
and
you
I
can
always
wear
have to wear
shorts.
pants on my normal podcast. On Sundays, they make me wear pants. So this podcast, I'm in control, baby.
There you go. Glad you're wearing shoes. So
let's talk about real quickly before we get into the first question. How many of these are we going to do, babe? Because what if nobody cares and what if nobody listens? Because I don't want to waste my time. You don't want to waste your time. You know what I mean? I want this to resonate with people.
Right. We want to help people.
How do we know if it's going to resonate?
Why don't we go ahead and try 12 different podcasts? I think that's a number. It's
12
a goal.
eps?
12 episodes that we're committing to.
You're not a quitter when it comes to episodes.
I'm not a quitter, when it comes to episodes, to watching them, to making them. I'm just not a quitter.
You say you're going to do something, you're going to do it, which I love.
Yes.
Last night I walked in and you were watching a TV show, which I was surprised to see you watching. But it was the 200th episode of that show that you'd seen?
It was Keeping Up with the Kardashians.
There
you can
is.
go ahead and put me on blast. And I was watching the final episode of 20 seasons. And yes, I saw every single episode because I'm not a quitter.
Yeah, there we go. So I don't know if we're going to do 200 episodes of the Uncomplicated podcast, but let's see if it resonates.
Let's
you know
see.
what I mean? And I just want to throw this out there. I've never said this before. Well, I said it one at a time. Smash that subscribe button. Here's the thing. If you don't subscribe, then it doesn't get visible from
Right.
what I understand, and less people see it. And we are doing this as a way to help people who are struggling with questions about faith or life or the Bible or relationships or whatever.
Right.
And when you do subscribe and when you do thumbs up and hit the bell, which, by the way, I've never done that too.
I've done it.
But I will do that to this one. That helps get, the word out for people who are searching. So,
Yep.
all right. So let's get into the first question.
All right. What's the first question? Hit me.
Hit you?
Well, not.
The first question is, when is it okay to hit back?
Ooh, babe, too soon.
When is it okay to hit back? What goes through your mind when you hear that question?
So when I hear that question, many people in the United States just watched an award show.
Beyond the United States.
Beyond the United States, but it was filmed here in California. And it was just a few days ago. And that is what my head goes to when you ask that question.
What
when is
happened
it
on the award
okay
show?
to hit back? A famous actor was a comedian was
Right.
hosting the award show.
Right.
And, said something which most comedians will poke fun at
Right.
different actors, and they did that. And the husband of the actor that they poked fun at got really upset
Yeah.
and went up on stage and slapped the comedian.
And a weird slap.
I know. You didn't think it was
a weird
real.
slap. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I saw the way he hit him and I was like, who slaps like that?
Well, you're a martial artist, so I mean, it's common even watching a movie.
Should I teach people how to slap someone appropriate right now?
No, you should
I
not.
shouldn't do
You
that.
should
All
not.
right.
That's not
Just
even
let
funny.
you know, when you need to throw a strike, let's say you're in a situation where you're defending yourself, okay? You want to follow through all the way. You don't want to lean back and slap someone. You want to follow all
Well,
the
he's
way
an actor,
through.
baby. He's not a martial artist, so let's just give him some grace with his form.
Yes.
But getting back to what
Have
happened,
you ever slapped someone like that?
I have never laid a hand on anybody. No.
Yeah, that's good because you're
And
a
I've
righteous
actually
woman.
never received any sort of slap or punch by the grace of God, and I'd like to keep it that way. But no, I've never engaged in anything like that. Unlike you, who is a black belt in Tong Sudo.
And you slap me all the time. Yes.
What?
No, I'm just
I
kidding.
was like, you're a black belt. Don't want any part of that.
You've never slapped me
You
before,
actually-
but you've threatened to slap me.
I've probably said that.
You've said, I will slap you sideways.
I've
I
never
will
said
slap
that.
you silly.
I've never said that.
Well, it's an empty threat. When I joking about this, you get into territory where you're like, wait a minute,
Right.
like, don't joke about this because there's definitely women and men victims of domestic violence. And I
Absolutely.
imagine women and men, but I could imagine seeing that and being like, dude, are we just going to let some guy slap someone and just
Right.
make that okay? Like, hasn't our culture, hasn't our society, like progressed? Aren't we the kind of people that say, hey, violence is not okay, like in any form?
Yeah.
Which I think is probably what's going to happen with this conversation. I know this just happened a day ago, but it's probably going to happen in this conversation. Like, what constitutes violence or not? So, yeah.
Right. Is it okay to hit back was the question, not is
Right.
it okay to hit?
Right.
I think everyone has an opinion, and our opinions are formed by our worldview, by how we've been raised and
Right.
conditioned. And so, I'm sure just like you, I think there's three different responses here. There's some people that think like, well, he was defending his wife. It's okay. It was honorable. I've heard that side of it.
Did part of you, when you saw him stand up for his wife in any way, be like, I would want justice to do that for me?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. And why
No.
not?
Because I personally don't have this like gaping hole of like, I need people to stand up for me.
Though there
I
are
feel-
people that I'm sure have been victimized and
Absolutely.
have nobody standing up for them.
Correct.
Yeah.
I haven't fortunately been a victim of domestic violence. And so I don't have that in me where I feel like people haven't stood up for me. So I
Right.
need someone to do that.
Right.
I would actually probably, thinking through it, if that were me and someone said something to me, I would be mortified if they reacted that way, because
What would you have wanted me to do?
I think nothing, kind of, shook it off, maybe not smiled. That would probably be like the extent of like, dude, not cool.
Okay.
But there would be nothing in me that's like, go fight that guy or go hit that guy, go get that person.
A
because-
lot of guys fantasize. Like I remember I had a friend, dude, in college. This is such a terrible story. He's never gonna listen to this. He told me that he planned a situation where he had one of his friends at school come and like try to attack a girl at school, and then he jumped in and tried to rescue her, like damsel in distress. And he told me that story, and I was like, what on earth are you talking about? And I think there's guys out there in maybe some sort of like reptilian primal consciousness there where they're like, this is how I show what it means to be a man, to come to the rescue of a woman. Every woman needs someone to come to the rescue. That's just not the case with everything. I think
right. Well, I think too, I think in our culture, even if you look at Disney movies, there is, every girl wants to be rescued is kind of the narrative we've grown up listening to. And I don't know if it's necessarily a healthy narrative.
Right.
But even more so than like our opinion. So there's some people that like it was honorable, right? And that's their opinion.
A lot of Disney movies don't even do that anymore.
Right. Like, they've kind of steered away from that. Yes.
Yeah, progress, like conscious, like collective conscious evolution.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that side. And then there's another side that would say violence, it's not okay.
Yeah. Which is interesting because, I'm old school, right? And my parents violently hit me with a belt as a kid, right? I don't hold that against them. I personally don't need to do that with my kids because you raised them so well. But just shout out to my wife for doing 90% of the lifting in that department. But
I love that you said my kids, not our kids.
Yeah. Sorry, our kids. Our kids. Well, sometimes you say your kids.
Well, when they're acting, when they're misbehaving, I will say your
kid,
your children.
Yeah. So I said that to Logan. I was like, your dog just pooped in the house.
I do call it your dog. We just got a puppy, and he's a puppy, and so
he will be our next guest on the podcast.
No, he will not.
Where was I going with that?
We were saying that there's people that, violence is not okay. That's
I was saying as a dude, 10 years ago, you would have asked me, was that violence? And I'm like, no, that dude got what, you talk about another man's wife, you get slapped in the face and that's over. Because I remember, with guys, it's a little bit, I don't know if it's still this way, but like we used to get in fist fights all the time when we were kids.
Yeah.
And then we would just like squash the beef. That's what we called it. Squash the beef.
It's almost weird. Like you had a fight club Bible study.
Right.
Where you guys would train in martial arts and read the Bible together. And there was like this camaraderie. Everyone loved it. It blew up. It was a big old thing. And I had a bunch of the wives or different females going like, Maria, we need to do a women's fight club. And I was like, no. I'm like, if you ever hit me, I won't ever want to see you again.
Right.
And I think I'm not classifying like everyone feels the same way, but I know as for myself, I can only speak for myself. If someone were to hit me, like that would stay with me.
Yeah.
As opposed to guys that can like beat each other up and then all of a sudden they're hugging and I'm like, what is, this is so
I was 15
weird.
years old. My friends jumped me.
Yeah.
I was 15 years old. One of my buddies mouthed off to me. We were doing a homework assignment at his house. And I couldn't take it anymore. And we went outside to his driveway and we threw down in the driveway, right? My parents rolled up right when we were like throwing blows. And like we pretended like we weren't doing anything. And I got in the car, but it was like, dude, Friday after school, we'll see you there. Like actually, right? So like that day on Friday or whatever, I'm like wearing like loose fitting clothes. I'm like warming up, We show up to the after school fight. And this little private school boy didn't bring enough friends to the fight.
Didn't know.
And
it's your first
I didn't
fight.
realize it. So they wound up jumping me and stomping me in, and it wasn't very fun.
Did you forgive them after? Like, was it fine?
So after they stomped me in, right? I mean, I got one good punch in the guy.
Did you have your black belt at this time?
I did. And also, yeah. Anyways, so it wasn't that bad. You know what I mean? It wasn't like violent, like where I like had a broken ribs or anything like that. It was just like his friends versus my friends, and I didn't bring enough friends. And anyways, this is the 90s. So afterward, we looked at each other.
Like a yard school rumble, something like that.
Yeah. Afterward, me and my buddy were like, "Want to go play Sega Dreamcast?" And we walked to his house and played video games after. And like,
After.
that's kind of a weird thing about guys. Like,
Yeah.
I have a feeling those two celebrities, those guys, because it was guy on guy, I bet you that in some weird way, I'm not condoning violence, but I have seen guys throw blows and still be friends afterward.
Right.
And it doesn't, of course, if it's gender opposite, there's
Right.
no, but I've seen guys just squash the beef. Now, I don't know if things are still that way.
Right.
I just know that as a kid, we used to get in fights all the time.
Right.
So,
well, I also think too, I mean, depending on your background, just like we were saying, your upbringing, like you grew up doing martial arts.
Yeah.
And our boys have done martial arts,
Right.
and our oldest is a black belt now.
Right.
And I remember when he was training, when he was young, I was like, the sparring was really hard for me to watch. He was a kid. It was hard for him. And you said, like, Maria, like, he needs to know that he can take a punch. And I was like,
for sure.
but does he,
Yeah.
So I just think our environments really shape how we feel and what we do. But where I want to get to, depending on whatever your opinion is, your
Right.
opinion may be that, like, there's just been too much light on this scenario. You know what I mean? That there's been too much press or too much attention. But
What would you tell your kids?
Well, let's talk about that,
Yeah.
because last night at dinner, we sat around the table and we actually told our kids about what had
'Cause
happened.
I knew he was talking about it at school.
Yeah, I'm sure someone talked about it at school. So we sat them all down as we ate our dinner, and we began to ask questions about what had happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think our oldest is turning 12, and then we have a 7-year-old son as well, and then we have a 6-year-old daughter. Did I get those ages right?
You did. Good
And
job.
I kind of asked him how each one of them felt
Right.
when I retold the story to him. And do you remember what our middle son said?
No, I just remember being surprised by it. What did he say?
He's the sweetest kid in the world.
Sweetest kid in the
and
world.
The most non-violent,
Yeah,
the most.
that guy would take like 5 punches before he would ever like fight back.
Yeah. But he did say, if someone did that to my mom, I would knock him out. And he's
Yeah.
only a blue belt, but but I'm like, whoa, hello.
Right. And he's so nonviolent. Like, he's actually
Yeah.
been bullied at school. He's been kicked and
Yeah.
hit before, and
Yeah.
won't even tell us because that's how non-confrontational he is.
Right.
So there was something in like his growing little manhood that was like innate in him, that was like, you can't do that to my mom or my sister. Like,
I think there is some sort of manhood something in there, because
I don't know.
when
Yeah.
I wrestle his older brother, he comes to his rescue. You know what I mean? Like, he definitely, that's when he kind of responds.
Right.
And it's almost like something switches in him when it's like, you can do that to me, but if you do that to somebody like my mom, I'm going to stand up for her.
Right.
And I mean, was there anything that felt honorable about that situation between those celebrities, or?
I think the standing up part is.
Yeah.
Right? Like, everyone's got a different opinion. Where I want us to get to is how we're supposed to respond as followers of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does the Bible say about this? How do we navigate these things?
Yeah.
And Jesus stood up for people that couldn't stand up for themselves.
Right.
And I think that's so important. I think it's how you do it that's also very important.
Right.
But I think there is something that when someone is, marginalized and pushed away, or is a victim, like, there's something in us of something righteous that like rises up and says, like, not on my watch. I'm not going to let that happen.
Okay, but here's the question. Standing up for somebody who can't stand up for themselves, we all understand that that's the gospel.
Right.
Jesus stood up for us
Right.
when we couldn't stand up for ourselves.
Right.
He lived the life that we couldn't live. He hung on a cross for us so we didn't have to do it.
Yeah.
He stands before the Father. He answers, like, that is the gospel. The good news is that somebody's here to rescue you.
Yeah.
Right? The
That's
scripture
nice.
says, what is that scripture? The Son of Man didn't come to be served, but to serve and to become a ransom for many. Right?
Right.
So there is that. But how you do that, the question then gets into the conversation of what is violence.
Right.
Right? So what is violence? Was Jesus ever violent?
I was just going there. I was, I think my wheels were turning as you were talking. We do have a story in the Bible where Jesus got a little bit upset.
Right.
And
a little bit upset?
A little bit upset.
He got upset a lot.
He got really upset.
Yeah.
And it's a story where it was a big weekend in Israel, and all these people were crowding the temple,
right.
but they were turning the temple into a marketplace.
Right.
And
ripping people off.
It was a house of worship that was becoming something else that it wasn't meant to be. And I think what really made Jesus upset was that people that wanted to get to God were being pushed out by all
the outer courts.
Right, the
was
outer
where they
courts
were setting up all that marketplace.
Right. So people could not get to God, and that's what upset Jesus.
Yeah.
It was this righteous anger,
where
he was like, "No, people want to get to God. We got to get all the barriers."
That was
out of
the
way.
court of the Gentiles.
Right.
So it's like they weren't allowed to go all the way into the most sacred areas, but the area that was for visitors on this big weekend, now they weren't even allowed there.
Right.
So how did he respond to that?
So I think, Jesus being fully God and fully human, took some time, which I think is important. When we get upset about something, I think it's really wise and to follow in Jesus' footsteps.
Dude, you ain't even prepared for this. Look at you right now preaching a sermon. Keep going.
To just take a minute to breathe.
Yeah,
and so what he did with his minute was he got some cords and started braiding them together to make a weapon.
It's so wild that I think we pass over this. Like Jesus made the whip.
Right. That had to take time.
Yes.
Like you had to go find the resources.
Yeah.
Gather them together. And this is like,
this
is ancient Israel. They don't have Walmarts and Targets on the corner. Like you can't just go to Home Depot and pick up your supplies and go home and make whatever you want to make. Like,
and you're saying he's doing that because like he's upset and he's like,
I think so. Cool down. I think he's like, this is going to take a minute to find this stuff and to make it. Let me cool down.
Observation.
I think it's wisdom. And so I don't know how long it took him. The Bible doesn't tell us, but I think it took a minute.
It says he made it. Yeah.
He made it. So that's some time there.
It's the opposite of like he walks in there and he's like, what the heck is going on in here?
Right.
And he grabs something off the table like a candelabra. Like, you know what I mean?
He
grabs like a poker for like, you know what I mean? For cattle, and he just like wails on people. He saw what was going on and he was angry, which is okay. The scripture, Jesus says this, and so does Paul, be angry, but do not sin. Right. So anger is an emotion that's good for you when there's reasons to be upset about things. When we see areas of injustice, when we see people that are being treated unfairly, that's supposed to tick us off. When Carter heard that last night, like I would slap that dude or whatever he said. Someone said that about my mom, I'd knock him out or whatever. So that is a really great observation that it was premeditated.
It was premeditated. Yeah. He took some time and then he made a whip, and it doesn't say that he whipped anybody.
That's
I think
true.
he just made a little bit of a commotion.
Yeah, he flipped the tables over.
Flipped the tables, probably just started whipping things out of the way.
I think he whipped the cattle and the animals and got them to run out all over the place.
But I think the commotion would cause that anyway.
Sure.
And so, I mean, we do see instances where Jesus had it called. I think the Bible says, you might be able to say if I'm right or not on this, but like it was a righteous anger and something rose up. He took time to cool down. He was still upset.
Yeah.
He responded in a, I guess is violence, then you're defining violence. Is it
the Bible defines that as zeal.
Right.
Right. And
is violence against
I guess you
a human?
Violence and zeal are not the same category.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. I think
one's an emotion and one's an action. Yeah.
So I think, if you're not whipping people, that's not violent, but it is causing a commotion.
Interesting.
And so anyway, that's my thought. But I think if we look at the situation, there's a scripture, and I know that you've got you've done a study on this, is about the scripture that says if you get slapped, like turn the other cheek.
Oh.
I want to talk about that
I've
a little bit.
never preached about this.
You haven't.
Because, I don't know the answer to this. And so
what have you learned in your studies?
And that,
thus
you know
far?
what? It's in this moment where I'm like, do I even say that? This is the whole thing about having a podcast. It's like, I preach, I don't know, 20 times a month, 30 times a month.
We didn't even tell people. We pastor a church.
Yeah. We pastor a church. And, the thing is about when you preach or when I preach, a lot of time goes into studying the scriptures. So, like what it meant, to who it was meant, the culture, the history, all that kind of stuff. And then you get up there and you give a 30-minute talk and that what you're going to say.
Right.
You don't go off script. The times that I've gone off script, I'm like, dude, don't put that on the podcast. Like I went off on a tangent there, And I've been doing this.
A little bit polished.
I've been preaching every week, 3 or 4 times a week, on average for, I don't know, 16, 17 years now. Mm-hmm. And so, I know not to go off script. I mean, little jokes here and there always, but like, this right now, what I'm about to say, I haven't prepared for this. You know what I mean? Like, what if later I'm like, oh, delete that podcast because it's not, anyways.
We'll call it wet cement. How about that? Right. Here's some wet cement. We're processing some things.
Okay. So what was the question about turn the other cheek?
Oh, what do you think that means? Like, dissect it a little bit for us.
What do people normally think it means? Come Matthew chapter 5, Sermon on the Mount. Jesus says, if someone slaps you in the face, turn to them the other cheek.
Right. Which would mean, here's my other cheek to slap as well. Right?
So someone's violent to you, and this is how you're supposed to respond. Right?
Right. And growing up, I've grown up in church. When I heard that and, turn the other cheek, I never thought it meant like, hey, give me this side. Like, here's this side to slap as well. I just thought like, oh, like, just let them do it. Or, it's okay. Just give them grace or forgive them. But
I think it can mean that.
I think it can mean that. But when I read it over and over again, giving me the other cheek is like, here's this one too. Go ahead, if you hit me on this one. So what have you learned in your kind of study of that scripture?
Well, what happened was I was at a birthday party or a party at somebody's house that and a famous pastor author came to the party that I really admired. Don't need to bring his name up. But just a guy, I'd read all of his books, and I just greatly admired him. He taught me a lot about the Bible. Really famous for teaching like first century, like historic rabbi traditions and Israeli traditions about Judaism and stuff. And, we get into this great conversation for like an hour.
You can tell this is not a rager party, guys. This is a get together.
Yeah, we're like taking shots.
As you're discussing theology. All right, go ahead.
Taking shots, talking systematic theology. Oh my gosh. Anyways, jokes. So we're talking for we're deep in this conversation, and he says, well, when Jesus told people to turn the other cheek, he wasn't telling them to sign up for more violence. He was telling them to protest. And I'm like, what? And he goes, in ancient cultures, when a Roman soldier or a master to a slave, they were allowed to slap their slaves around, and it was permissible to backhand a slave, right?
Wow.
Or a soldier could backhand a common person. Like, you gotta understand, Israel was occupied by Rome.
Yeah.
And so there was a subservient situation. So there was he could backhand a citizen, and that citizen couldn't do anything about it.
Right.
The same soldier could say, hey, I have to go carry my 50-pound bag of weapons and resources with me for 1 mile.
You have to do that.
Yeah,
the citizen would have to do that.
And what would happen is if you did that for a mile, you walk a whole mile there and a whole mile back, you've lost like an hour, and like that messes, you can't work that day, And it's like, it's awful because it's like, here's a Roman that is your enemy, that is like,
in charge, like has authority over you.
Is occupying your place and maybe murdered, a
family member, right?
And your hard-earned money from being a fisherman or whatever is paying his salary for more oppression. So like your taxes are fueling your own oppression. I mean, it's an awful situation, right? Well, in this conversation, there's 3 kind of things that happen there on the Sermon on the Mount when Jesus is talking. One of them, he says, turn the other cheek back toward him. And it's possible, and I don't know if I believe this, but it's possible what that means. And there's people smarter than me who say it is. That when he says turn the other cheek, he's saying when you get backhanded with one hand, you turn toward the other cheek so he can't backhand you again, because the only way they're allowed to do it was a backhand. So when you turn the other cheek,
silent protest.
Yeah, you're not hitting them back, but you're also not letting them punk you over and over again.
Interesting.
And that when you do that toward them and they can't hit you, that you're then putting the shame back on them. So you are fighting the violence with shame. Like you're basically shaming them back. So you're disrespecting them back, which is like, okay, interesting. And I mean, you can Google that and look at that. There's people smarter than me who've kind of explained that better, but it does kind of, and he goes further. So this author was telling me, he was like, and when they said, walk 2 miles, walk an extra mile, right? So it's like, if this Roman soldier says, walk with me a mile, he goes, walk with them 2. And how do most people think about that when they hear that? They go the extra mile. What do they hear?
Go the extra mile. Yeah. I mean, that's what they hear. It's like, There's
a gas station down the street from my office here that the name of the convenience store attached to it is the Extra Mile, right? Like it's in our culture. It's almost like the Good Samaritan. Like, it's like we think of
go farther, do more.
Yeah. And it's like you're doing this out of the kindness of your heart. So it's the extra mile that you don't have to do. But Jesus is saying possibly,
right,
if they're going to take you away from your job and make you do this so you don't get paid at work, and they're going to make you carry that, walk an extra mile that they're not allowed to demand from you, because they're allowed to backhand you, but they're not allowed to fronthand you. They're allowed to make you walk a mile, but they're not allowed to make you walk 2 miles. So it's a protest that's saying, like, you don't own me. I'm not your slave. I'm doing this out of my own will.
My own will.
Yeah. So you can't make me do anything. I'm doing this, and it's almost like, once again, it's this subversive kind of,
silent
response.
And
then there's the other one, which is if someone sues you for your cloak, if someone asks you for your cloak,
right?
The same thing. Like, they were allowed to take your clothes off of your back if they're cold. These Roman soldiers, right? And so if they take the outer coat off, what do you have left?
Your inner coat.
Your inner coat.
Yeah.
Which is called your cloak. Right. So you have a coat and you have a cloak. What is your cloak? Your cloak is your underwear.
Yeah.
So when he says, give them your second coat, those of you that have 2 coats, give them the second one. It's possible that he's saying, just
give them everything.
Just go naked and flash them. Because in those cultures, it wasn't
honorable.
It wasn't shameful to be naked as much as it was shameful to look upon someone who is naked.
Interesting.
So if you look at somebody who's naked, now you're the dirty one.
Gotcha.
You're not supposed to be looking at that. And so there's like stories, of like nonviolent protests where they would take off their clothes and they would stand in a field naked, so that, or different things like that, as a way of like using their body to like shame them and make them, because they're not supposed to look at it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And they're just like, here I am. Oh, you want my coat? Here, take both of them.
Right.
Oh, you want a mile? Here, I'll go too, because you're not my boss. Here, you're gonna slap me? Well, then maybe you need to do this. There's like this. There's this, and I don't know if that's what it means.
Right.
I don't know if that's what it means. I think we have enough of Jesus's teachings and understanding the gospel to know that he wants us to lay our life down for others.
Jesus said radical things.
Yeah, and he shows us how to lay his life down for others, and he shows that. I mean, shoot, he washes the disciples' feet.
Well, he also climbed up on a cross.
Moments before Judas betrayed him, he's washing his feet. So, we see in other examples of Jesus is like, and it says in John, like, true love knows nothing greater than the one who lays his life down for another. So anyways, back to the conversation about what is violence or how to respond, to that. Jesus tends to say, you could build a case there that God's calling you to be a bridge, but not necessarily a doormat.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. And that's usually like the counsel I give people when they're in a situation where one of the spouses is beating up on them. It's just like, oh, but he loves me, and it's like, dude, and in fact, I hate to say this, but I think even in the acceptance speech of that celebrity, I think he said something along the lines of like, love makes you do crazy things. Right. And it's like, ooh, like, love doesn't make you be violent like that. So, yeah.
I can think of one other scenario where there was violence in the Bible, and we can talk about how Jesus responded to it. But one of his disciples was a former zealot. Right. And he cut off, a zealot. Let me give a little context there if you don't know what this was.
Was that Simon Peter, or was it Simon the Zealot?
Simon the Zealot.
Oh, so Simon the Zealot cut off his ear,
Didn't
or did
he?
Peter?
Am I getting it wrong?
I don't know.
Am I getting it wrong?
I don't know.
I would guess it was Simon the Zealot.
It was Peter.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay. Simon's, either way, one of his disciples with the same name, cut off the ear of like an altar boy, essentially. I mean, if that would be like the common name now.
His name is like Malachus or something. I don't know.
And here he was trying to like stand up for Jesus, and he cuts off the dude's ear.
Yeah.
And how did Jesus respond?
Well, let's just talk about was he aiming for his ear? Let's be honest.
I'm sure he wasn't.
He was probably trying to cut his throat or cut his face or cut his head off.
That's so funny. I just assumed it was Simon the Zealot because he had like a little dagger and was like trying to kill someone.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, in one gospel accounts, it says somebody cut off his ear, but then in John's gospel, he goes, "Oh, it was Peter."
He just named him.
Yeah, he just throws him under the bus. He's like, "It was Peter, guys. Like, let's just make sure we get this straight." Typical Peter, you know what I mean? Out of nowhere, trying to cut a dude's head off.
Yeah.
And then Jesus is like, "You've been carrying swords the whole time? Like, you've been with me how many years? Like, why would you think this is appropriate?" But Jesus essentially says, I wasn't planning on doing this as my last miracle. Somebody find the ear, put it back on the guy. And then he looks at Simon and he's like, "Dude, bro, like if I wanted to, I could call like thousands of angels down from heaven and roast these fools right now. This is me laying my life down."
That's not the great translation, but yes.
That's not the smoke these dudes.
Roasting these dudes, yeah.
Well, essentially, he's like, I got the armies of heaven at my beck and call. This is not an issue of me not having power. This is an issue of me being gentle.
Right.
And I think a lot of times men, we think of gentleness as a lack of power.
Right. As a weakness.
Yeah. And so when we dominate, when we assert ourselves, when we stand up for people, a lot of times it's about like showing that you're strong and powerful. But Jesus was powerful. He was strong. He is the strongest. He's God, and there's no limit. And so what he's trying to tell Peter is it's not that I'm weak, it's that I'm gentle.
It's that I'm withholding my strength.
Right.
And that's actually
gentleness is not weakness.
Right.
Gentleness, in fact, if you are powerful and you hold yourself back,
so good.
That's called being gentle.
Right.
But if you're weak and you hold yourself and you don't have anything, that's just you being weak.
Right.
So the more powerful you are, the greater capacity there is for gentleness.
Right.
Gentleness is a fruit of the Spirit because God knows that we're powerful. Our words are powerful. The way we treat people is powerful. The way we talk about people is powerful. There is a lot of power in physical presence and those kind of situations. And I think if there's any guys out there listening right now, I think at the end of the day, you got to understand that gentleness is a fruit of the Spirit. It is being Christ-like, but it's not evidence of your weakness.
So good.
It's actually evidence of how strong you really are.
That's so important for us to know.
I look at that situation with that celebrity slapping that host, and it's like, I understand that he wanted to respond, and maybe he should have responded, but not violently.
Right.
So I actually I'm working on my master's right now, and we had this big conversation.
I'm going to call you Master Coleman.
Yeah. And in my second year of this program, let's just not get too ahead of ourselves, all right? I still got 2 more to go.
One day.
Yeah. So we're having this conversation about violence and force. There's a difference between violence and force.
Yeah.
Right? So like when I was a kid, the police department was called the force.
Right.
That's what it's called, the force.
The police force.
Yeah. And then on the side of the car, it said to serve and protect, right? And I in fact, I asked my kids, I said, well, are policemen violent? And they're like, no. Well, sometimes.
They're like, it depends on the police officer.
It's been a rough few years. So they have I think they have a more comprehensive understanding of yeah. So anyways.
Of our world.
Yeah, they've seen some things now, and I usually have those conversations with them during those times about those things, like the Ahmaud Arbery thing. Like I remember talking with like Logan extensively about that. But anyways, to make a long story longer, there's a difference between violence and force.
Yeah.
And policemen are not supposed to be violent.
Right.
But they are supposed to have force. They're supposed to use their power, right, to control or
restrain.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the difference. Is violence is usually punitive. Like the reason why that celebrity slapped that person was not just to protect his wife, but was to get him back for what he did.
Right.
Right. That's a whole different situation.
It's a great way to describe
violence
punitive.
And violence escalates. Violence begets violence. Right. But another way he could have responded or would be to use force, but not violence.
Right.
So what would that have looked like?
A headlock? I don't know. Is that violent?
Whoa, what if he did that?
I don't know. I mean,
like, what if he walked up there and put him in a headlock?
Would have been stopping someone that was attacking your wife or coming at your wife. Like, dude, you're not going to do anything. You're staying right here.
Yeah.
That's probably more accurate than a headlock. But I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. What would that have looked like if he would have like put him in a headlock and like laughed
Been
and
like, dude,
messed up his hair?
I don't know, like
and was
noogie?
like apologized to my wife or something. You know, I don't know. There's something in, I think, men that, you know, I think there is something about us. We feel an obligation to stand up for the women that we love. Mm-hmm. How you do that, like Christ, there's a way to do it that's not violent. Yeah. There's got to be a better way. When I asked my oldest son what he thought about that, he was just like, there had to be a better way.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. We live in some crazy times where there's cameras everywhere and everything's recorded now. And so what may not have been, gotten as much press, 100 years ago today, got a ton of press.
Well, I don't know how long we recorded that. I forgot to set a timer.
Oops.
So I feel like we could wrap it up with that.
Wrap it up. How can people ask questions for episode number 2? We will try to cover.
All right. Well, hopefully my website, justicecoleman.com, will be done. And you can just put that on there, submit a question, or we'll just do it on
or even in the
Instagram.
Comments, like if there's comments.
Yeah.
On YouTube.
Do that. Comment a question on YouTube underneath there, and we'll try to pick one of those. And don't forget to smash that subscribe button.
Thanks for joining us.